Welcome to Framework. This is John. I'm one of the hosts of Framework, and with me as always, the other host of Framework, Al. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good, man. We're doing a new release today, which, we don't do all that frequently, but I think we were pretty excited about Zach Cregger's follow-up to Barbarian, which is a movie that we did not discuss previously. So maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. We also have a special guest today, recurring guest, I should say. Maybe that's unspecial in some way, because now you've been on half a dozen times.
Very unspecial.
Oh yeah, you're one of the Framework All-Stars, man.
Not less special, less unique, because you have we keep having you back. Why Weapons though? Were you a big fan of Barbarian?
Well, Brett Blake. First off, did we say his name?
Did I say? I thought so.
It's me. I'm here. The horror correspondent.
Yeah. You're our horror correspondent, exactly. So this is a huge horror release. So much so that Al wanted to talk about it on the podcast. I was like, oh, well, definitely.
Incredible.
When you get one of those, it's just like, well, we gotta get.
Well, this is a sophomore effort, and it felt like a big deal release, at least among like film geeks, right?
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Well, it has an incredibly compelling trailer and premise. The whole thing, like when you saw the first trailer for Weapons, you were like, oh, damn, I'm clocking that one. That looks like that could be quite the film. And it is on the promise of Barbarian, which, I don't know, I think a brief moment for that, a terrific film, right? I think everyone liked
Absolutely.
That movie.
Yeah, I think it's a very good movie. And that it set things up so much that it reminded me so much of Get Out in terms of Zach Cregger being a guy from a sketch comedy background, just like Jordan Peele, that sort of made his splashy debut with a fairly lean, contained horror movie. And now we're going to get the follow-up, which is much broader in scope and ambition and potentially social commentary. And so I was excited to see Zach Cregger's version of Us, because I think I'm one of the bigger defenders of Us. I think it's actually my favorite Jordan Peele movie, even as I acknowledge it's a lot messier and not nearly sort of perfectly crafted object that Get Out is. Barbarian is so much gnarlier than Get Out that it's a little harder to say it's as perfectly crafted object, just because it's so gross. But it kind of is perfect for what it is, for what it's going for.
It is quite elegant structurally. It is audacious. It's fun and funny. That's the main thing he shares with Peele, and I'm sure this is sketch comedy background, is that he knows how to manipulate a moment incredibly well. And I think that is in evidence in both Barbarian and Weapons. Like, this guy knows how to create an audience moment, as Jordan Peele does.
And just an interesting note on Peele, I think it might be worth pointing out, he desperately wanted to produce Weapons. His production company was involved in the bidding war, and the rumors that have been floating around Hollywood is that he actually fired some of his management team because they failed to secure the Weapons rights. So I think he has identified in Cregger a bit of a kindred spirit.
It seems inevitable that they're going to get together at some point. They're big new voices in horror. Weapons, I believe, is a pretty big hit as well as Barbarian. So, they're kind of running parallel careers at this point.
Yeah, even if they're not going to like actually team up and work together or whatever, if you are a producer in the horror space, you recognize them as just a rising talent and somebody who's made a name for themselves very quickly within that sphere. Yeah, you should be. I don't know. I mean, who knows about that story? There's probably a lot more to the relationship with those management people who let go than this one thing. But watching this movie, I'm like, yeah, you guys fucked up not getting this. This is a pretty fucking great movie.
Okay.
That's my take anyway.
All right, so we're going to get to this here. So let's say up front, before we really talk at all about Weapons, we are going to spoil the hell out of this film. We are going to talk about the ending, all the stuff that is going on. We're going to explain what's going on in Weapons. We're going to have opinions about that, and this is definitely, I think I can speak for all of us, a film that can be spoiled. Like, this is a movie that you would not want to know about before you watch it. Much like Barbarian, a lot of the film's power comes from discovery, from seeing what happens and not being able to call it in advance, and reacting live to it. It's big. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I did feel like I kind of glommed onto the basic, like the basics of the villain plot, and like the mystery of the kids relatively early on. Before
it's about that house. They let you know that very early.
Yeah. That doesn't mean that I knew how things were going to play out. Like, it was still quite surprising. So I don't want to use that as a knock. I would say, as far as the spoilering and the surprises go here, I was pleasantly surprised that this did not. It's less spoilable than Barbarian, let's say, which is one of the most spoilable. Like, by spoilable, I mean like ruined by knowing too much of any movie I can think of. And I was a little worried, shifting maybe from the comparison point from Jordan Peele to M. Night Shyamalan, that Cregger was going to feel like he had to recreate the basic trick more directly. And, this has reveals, sure, but structurally, Barbarian's like big innovation was the sort of bifurcated, restart thing. And this has a little bit of that, but it's much more of just a Pulp Fiction, non-linear time structure.
Yeah, or Magnolia is the movie that's getting floated around a lot. And I totally see why that comparison is being made. It's not a typical structure for this kind of movie, which is very interesting, I think. Probably one of the most interesting things about Weapons is how it's structured, how the story is told. It seems... I don't know. Well, we can get into that a little bit. Like, to its benefit, do you think? Probably.
Yes.
Right? Because it comes to a crescendo and then restarts every 20 minutes or so. I guess the first one's a little longer and some of them are a little shorter. But basically, it's like I guess you'd call it, a 5 or 6 act structure.
Well, like Pulp Fiction. That you get title cards and resetting, and you're seeing sort of scenes from a different perspective, or at least you're glancing by them.
Well, that is even more of an anthology, though. Like that is like 3 stories, and they are connected, but they are kind of on their own. They're but you're not going to say any of these are complete stories on their own.
Pulp Fiction is more nonlinear in the sense that you're seeing chunks of the story wholly out of place, whereas in Weapons, yes, we sort of keep going backwards. Each section progresses forward in time, and then we sort of reach that crescendo point, and then the next chapter, if you will, takes us back further again, and then we move forward again. So it's sort of we're always moving forward, then we double back, then we move forward again, then we double back. And each time we move forward, we get a little bit more context for the actual narrative. And I think that's key to this movie's success, at least for me. It's key to my enjoyment. If you were to just present this in a fully straightforward way, I mean, yes, a skilled filmmaker could still make that very engaging, but that structure, for me, really, really works. And I think is an interesting way to present this story from multiple perspectives, because that was clearly sort of what Cregger came into this probably wanting to do, is, again, that Magnolia thing, or like a Stephen King novel that jumps around from perspectives. I'm going to tell this story sort of in a tapestry-like or mosaic-like format where each person has their own sort of perspective, and their experiences are going to inform then what you're going to see in the next chapter or 2 chapters down the line.
I also think that this film in particular has one big issue that you have to structure it this way or it won't work, which is the second you see Gladys, you're like, yes. Oh, well, that's what's going on. So, like once we get to that point in the story, there's no more suspense as to, I mean, I guess just some of the minutia of how it all works, but you know basically what's up.
If you were going to structure this differently, if you were going to structure this more linearly, you're probably handling Gladys in a different way then. Like, she's probably not as overtly visually as peculiar, let's say, as she comes across.
That is a choice. Like,
absolutely.
They definitely could have made her more plausibly human. And he very much goes, he wants her to evoke Pennywise.
I think it's part of the intent that she is obviously off-putting, because I think part of the theme of the movie is people not quite seeing what they should be seeing right in front of them. Because any police investigator or detective or school administrator, once they take one look at Gladys and start listening to what she's talking about and the excuses she's spinning for why Alex's parents are not available, those are gigantic red flags. And I think the movie's making a point about that, how it is apparently not a red flag for almost anybody in this town.
Yeah, even before she speaks, like just you walk in the principal's office. I think every other person suspect. I'm sorry, lady.
What are you wearing?
Yeah, you can't walk into a public place looking like this. We have to address this.
Okay, well, speaking of have to address, this is my thing with the movie. I don't know what I think about weapons. I had a lot of fun watching it. I really did. The end in particular is quite remarkable. I am struggling with this movie because the writing for many of the characters, especially Gladys, I'm just like, seriously? There are so many plot holes in this. There are so many logistical problems and logic failures and things that you have to like sort of misdirect to get around, especially involving Gladys and how this is all set up. There are so many mistakes she makes. There's so many stupid things about this plan that the only way to accept it is that part of the comedy is how dumb this character is. Like there are.
Oh yes, definitely is. At the risk of spoiling things for you, John, I think we've been doing this for enough years now that I can tell you what you think of this. You like this movie. It's going to grow on you. I think when you rewatch this, you're going to have a much better idea of that. But you know what? Okay, tying that what you're talking about, the giant plot holes. We can tie that into the structural stuff because there was a point in this movie where I was just sitting there stunned, thinking like, how did this make it into movie form in 2025? Like, I cannot believe this wasn't forced into a streaming series format. Like it lends itself to that. With each one of these title cards, there could be an episode for each of these characters that reveals a little more. It would be so clean, and you could get 6 episodes out of it so easily. And I do think that might kind of ruin it, though.
I think
yes.
The more time you have to think about this, yes.
Yeah, because the actual mystery aspect would fall apart really quick if we were like actually following a police investigation with any depth here, you know. Because then you go, wait, so why did the K9 units not lead them directly to Alex's house?
Essentially, we're talking about true detective night country here, which is exactly what happened to that. If you do 8 hours on that plot, it's going to seem really dumb. So, it would be a similar thing, I think, maybe. But much more
logistically, so, they're up in the middle of nowhere. It's harder to, it's just harder to do basic, I guess, investigatory stuff in the polar ice caps than it is here. But yeah, there's all kinds of things. You know, why would searching the house of the one student who didn't disappear from that classroom, like from top to bottom, why would that not be the opening move of any investigation?
Okay.
Before you get Aunt Gladys into it. You know?
Yes. Why is this her plan? Why is she going to a sparsely populated small town if this is her plan, where she can do this anywhere? If a big town, she could even look like a clown if she wanted in a major city, and it would be fine. Why are you taking all the kids from this one class and leaving one who will then show up? It is the biggest possible lead that any police detective could have. Okay, it probably has something to do with that one kid who showed up. Let's go talk to his parents. There's a lot of things that they don't want him to see there. She doesn't want to get caught, you know. You could just take tokens from other people. She does it with Benedict Wong. She could do this all on her own in a way that would be untraceable. It would not be a problem.
Yeah, he can move to a different house.
Yeah, there's so many things.
Once they're set up.
And in fact, the fact that she does have that kid left alone is the reason that she gets caught. Everyone follows the lead of him to her. She has to be wildly dumb to do anything.
It should not even be necessary, because even if we're following this in a streaming series that does something, I'm trying to think of what a good example of this is, but I always want to say if it's more like a Gone Girl in terms of it starts really grounded and then gets more like wilder and more satirical as it goes on. But if we're doing like an early episode that's doing a kind of almost true crime-ish disappearance thing, like a True Detective type of thing, well, there are, even in the middle of the night in a small town, there are other cameras that the police and the feds and everybody would be combing, other Ring cameras from houses that didn't have kids disappear, that still caught glimpses of all these kids running down the street and converging. It would have been a pretty good trail to go to. It also taking you to the first house you would be looking at anyway. All of this stuff in a week-to-week format, I think, would fall apart. And in this movie format, I don't know, it worked a treat for me and my audience.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm not here to say this is bad. I'm kind of in awe of just the keeping these plates spinning aspect of this, like as a piece of filmmaking, a storytelling, the crafting of this story. I'm really, really in awe of what Zach Cregger did, making this stuff not matter in the long run, and having these huge moments that he builds to at the end of each act. It's a wildly entertaining film. So that's why I'm so confused by this film, I think.
To me, and I'm the kind of person who, I guess it depends on how the movie overall strikes me. It sort of then informs how willing I am or not to sort of overlook nitpicks and or, quote unquote plot holes. But to me, there was enough in the movie where like I can overlook almost everything you guys were just talking about. Like, yes, why is Gladys behaving this way? It seems pretty reckless, like she's going to get caught. To me, there was a suggestion that she's like in a desperate state. And this may be like her last Hail Mary pass to, because we don't know anything about her background. We don't know where she came from. We don't know anything about her history. There's the suggestion that she's been doing this sort of thing for a long, long time. But I think there was enough in Amy Madigan's performance, which I think we definitely need to highlight in a major way at some point on this conversation. There was enough there that I was like, okay, this is not her in peak form. Like she's off her game probably because she's in kind of some kind of desperate situation. And then also, and again, this could be somebody just retroactively trying to pull something out of their ass to justify sort of these kinds of questions that we're asking after the movie. But I read somebody's analysis of this, and I really agreed with it, that you have to treat this as like a modern fairy tale, and you have to treat it kind of with fairy tale logic. And I think the voiceover from the little girl really is what sort of is supposed to tip you off that this is not really the real world. It looks like the real world, but the rules of this world and the logic of this world is not, you can't bring our real world thinking about such things into this too much. Like this is much more of a, not an allegory, but it's operating on a fairy tale sort of level.
There's Hansel and Gretel logic to it.
Yes.
But that only barely holds up in movie format because where you have a couple of scenes where, you have Josh Brolin looking at like the town plans and triangulating routes through around the cell phone towers and whatnot. And that doesn't fit with Hansel and Gretel that neatly. If people are trying to apply like the sort of real world problem solving and logic to this fairy tale threat, that falls apart at a greater length, I think.
That opening monologue or opening narration is that's another thing to me that that is so intriguing because I find that so effective. Like it's the tagline of the film essentially. If you look at the poster, it's literally just that. It's at 2:17 p.m. these kids walked out of their beds, went outside, ran out into the night, and you never saw them again. And that's a very evocative fairy tale thing. It's also a lie. It is straight up a lie. They did come home in the end. That is how the film ends. They're fucked up, and it's a weird thing, but like the movie does lie to you right out front to get you into that place. That is a thing that is hanging over the story the whole time. There is no happy ending coming. That they tell you right away. I mean, and by evoking school shootings, by the way, which is a whole thing I want to get into, but they are letting you know. Or
does it?
Thing. Well,
it certainly does. But let's hang on John's point here for a moment here. I'm really surprised to hear you say this. That we have usually, if anything, the challenge for our podcast is that our tastes are too similar and we have very similar reaction to things. I was the exact opposite reaction. I love this movie pretty unreservedly. My one knock on it is I thought the bookending narration was probably unnecessary. I was like, but who is this girl telling this story? Why does it like?
Well, it frames it as a fairy tale for sure, but it does set an expectation that the movie defies. And I mean, I don't know that works. I'm actually not sure if that's a good idea or not.
She also says right at the top that this is a true story. They pulled the Coen Brothers thing, which, I mean, that in itself is already like, well, of course this isn't a true story. So that should already be tipping you off that this is operating on some other level than reality.
By telling you the exact opposite is weird. Yeah. I don't know. I was also just thinking, is there an even creepier version of this opening that doesn't have the opening, like the narration explaining what's going on? If we're just sort of like seeing the disappearance happen.
Well, this movie is not actually want to deal with parental grief in that way, though, is the thing. This is not a movie about losing your kids. Not really. I mean, it's in the Brolin character, and I think he's wonderful in the movie. But like, he's really good here. That's not quite what we're doing. That's not quite what we're experiencing. We're doing a Hansel and Gretel version of it, if anything. This is not going to engage in the way Hereditary does with, the idea of losing your kid. It's way too entertaining.
This is more in Sam Raimi land. It's closer to Sam Raimi territory.
Mm-hmm. We keep just going from touchstone to touchstone about this. Is it Sam Raimi? Is it Jordan Peele? Is it Stephen King? Is it Paul Thomas Anderson or Tarantino? I think that's actually, that's a good thing. I mean, I think that speaks highly of this, that its influences can be both kind of transparent to us, but also so varied that they come out of the blender as its own concoction.
Picnic at Hanging Rock, I think, is also kind of a key one here too.
That's interesting.
Which also has a little bit of a set, I wouldn't say fairy tale, but sort of dreamlike sort of quality in its approach to that story.
Huh, that's cool. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you could put it on the bill with things, Picnic Hanging Rock, with Sweet Hereafter, with something like The Leftovers. But it's such a again, it swerves out of that and into such a more entertaining place as it goes on.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like there's a version of this that is like The Leftovers for sure, and that's kind of what I thought it was going to be, which seemed odd coming from the guy who did Barbarian. But when you see, oh no, it's definitely the Barbarian guy making this film.
Yeah, the exact moment is when you see Gladys's silhouette through the frosted glass. It's when okay, here's this is the Barbarian guy showing himself now.
Yeah, one thing I think is really cool, interesting and cool about Cregger is that he is such a product of 50 years of horror movies too. Like, you can see the influences, you can see the stuff he's doing and what he's drawing from, and the trends that he is kind of following or subverting. It's fun. And usually when you say that about somebody making new horror movies, it's because, well, they're aping somebody specifically, but he's not. He's doing a Tarantino version of that, I think, which is, it's kind of all of it. It's kind of everything is synthesized into his vision, and he is doing original stuff too. I think, the structural elements of this being primary there, but it is, it's definitely the product of what's come before, which, and we've talked about Tarantino. I don't think that's a knock either.
Yeah, we're going to have actually another spoiler out there coming up in our podcast feed in a couple of weeks. We're going to do an episode about Tarantino knockoffs and how that became its own cottage industry in the 90s.
Yeah.
And having just recently done that conversation and then seeing this movie, it was like, oh man, it was top of my mind, I guess. But I'm surprised, one, that it took about 30 years for anybody to apply that Pulp Fiction nonlinear structure to horror effectively. But also just this is, I think, one of the better iterations of that type of thing. He seems to have taken the right lessons from Tarantino and that structure and how they do build to those crescendos and then cut out sort of right at the moment of not quite catharsis, and how that you reach a climax in each one. and that buys you some patience from the audience to reset for the next one.
Yeah.
I also like that it does not present on its face as a Tarantino ripoff in a way a lot of those movies did. This is taking structural ideas there. It's not taking shot selections. And
or the dialogue.
Cool.
I mean, a lot of the Tarantino ripoffs was like, oh, we're gonna do this hip, cool dialogue, because that's what Tarantino does. It's like that. I mean, the dialogue in
stop
this movie
is dead
is
for
fine,
5 minutes to talk about Yogi Bear or some shit. They don't do
yeah. That's the, and it's sort of like, not to go too far off on a tangent, but like all the Jaws ripoffs that emerged in the late 70s, early 80s, they were ripping off the wrong stuff. They were ripping off like, there's a greedy mayor, there's some kind of an animal threat, but like what you really want to be ripping off is like the characters and the fact that the characters are, have interesting relationships and are interesting people, and that stuff never got ripped off.
Mm-hmm.
That, again, stay tuned. We're going to be getting into some of that stuff in this feed pretty soon. Can we jump over to what I think is, if I'm identifying the one thing that this reminds me of most, is it feels like a Stephen King story. Like he's adapting a story that King never actually wrote, but it's small town invaded by supernatural evil, and we are going to experience that through a sort of kaleidoscopic shifting perspective of the different residents of this town and their overlapping relationships with each other as things spiral into bigger and bigger supernatural madness.
Yeah.
That's Needful Things. That's the Tommyknockers.
Salem's Lot.
That's Salem's Lot. Yeah.
And frankly, the villain is very much a Stephen King character. You would definitely see her popping up in some Stephen King small town in Maine.
Oh yeah, and like I said, we can talk about Amy Madigan now. To me, immediately, just Anne Gladys is sort of an all-timer horror villain. Like I think in a just world, she would be getting a supporting actress nomination for
Absolutely.
this.
It's quite a swing. So the thing about this movie, like going in, I thought it was going to be a school shooting metaphor for sure.
Yeah,
and it lets you think that for a while. The AR-15 in the sky thing. It seems like it's really, really going to be about that, and it is not. It is like, no, it's a witch. It's a witch all along. That's what's going on. It's a witch doing witchcraft stuff. Ugh, spooky ooky. And I thought that was quite funny, but it's a little frustrating at the same time, which I guess is the film in a nutshell for me, as I'm talking it out here. That's what I think I'm discovering about my reaction is No, I knew this going in. I'm confused at what I ultimately think of this. I've got a lot of conflicting ideas.
Yeah, but this is how I know that you're going to end up liking this movie, though, is because you're taken aback because you were confused by thinking this is going to be more elevated horror, and it turned out to be something pulpier and sillier than that. And I think over time you're going to remember that you don't actually like elevated horror like that much.
Like elevated horror.
Or that you like other kinds of horror just as much.
I suppose, yeah. I mean,
you like Sam Raimi as much as Ari Aster, I think.
Yes, I do. But there's a veneer of elevated horror on top of this, where it is a trauma thing, where it is about the breaking of our collective psyche over school shootings and children just disappearing all of a sudden. They're just gone through external events. While they're at school, you have no control over it. I mean, that's not quite the case in this, but it's school based anyway, and it's there's an aspect of it that something I've really thought this was going to be about, which is where do your kids get their information? What are they seeing on the internet when you're not looking? What are they hearing about that you're not conscious of? And should you be scared of that? Like, I've seen a lot of movies lately kind of trying to get at that and not really succeeding. There was the AI Evil House movie from last year called Afraid. And the AI and Afraid was like bolded. And that was like, that was the hook, It was like, what are your kids being subjected to? What are they finding when you're not looking? Because you weren't paying attention, maybe. That is, a modern fear that is I think, as a new parent, you are too, Al. This is like something that is a concern. It is something that does keep me up a little bit at night. And I thought we were going there with this, and it's like, no, it's a witch.
What does? It's look, school shooting fears keep me up at night. And
Uh-huh.
now this other thing, which I was getting more from this actually until the AR-15 in the sky showed up, at least, that the, again, I want to praise this movie for not being a really like clean didactic allegory for a particular social trauma. But what I was getting more was the mass disappearance aspect of it was the fear of like children's susceptibility to memes and the idea that you could be just, and the entire class could be infected by whatever it is. It's Andrew Tate or whatever.
Yes, that's what I thought we were doing.
You as a parent don't have any direct line onto it, but how quickly that can just sort of warp an adolescent mind in a group and in a group setting, of course. That just works even further, and that's like a big parental anxiety. It's also not a completely separate issue from school shootings.
I agree.
The
These are hot button
radicalization
issues.
pipeline or whatever. Yeah,
the movie is engaging with, or well, not really. It is gesturing towards, and then just like which though.
So when I walked into the movie, I was kind of anticipating, because there's social commentary in Barbarian. So I was anticipating this might be trying to have a conversation about some of these subjects just because of the premise. I very deliberately stayed away from the trailers and stuff, so I didn't know a lot about any particulars, but I just assumed, okay, he's probably going to be talking about this. And what I found kind of delightful is that by the end of the movie, it's like, no, this is not really what this is about. And my theory about the rifle in the sky.
Oh, yes, please.
And this is informed by nothing. This is just purely me speculating, because it is so much more on the nose and overt than anything else in the movie in terms of like what it could thematically be about. Like there's nothing else in the movie even close to being that sort of stark, and it's kind of out of nowhere. It's in a nightmare sequence, so you can kind of get away with it a little more in that context. But what I think is maybe going on here, knowing that Cregger comes from comedy, is that he's like, I'm just going to throw this in here and see what people think about it. And it really means nothing to me. It really means nothing to the movie. I'm just sort of supplying a little bait to people to see what kind of theories they can spin up. Because you look at stuff like the imagery in The Shining of, a can that happens to have a Native American's face on it in the storeroom, and people think that unlocks the meaning of the entire movie. It's like, no, that's probably just the set dressing and it got bumped and that's why it's facing the camera. But I think he perhaps could be tipping his cap to the desire, especially among horror fans, to overanalyze things and to try to come up with elaborate theories, when in reality, it's just Amy Madigan terrorizing this town.
It's tough because it's so literal in this film, though. What is happening is so literal. It's a witch, and she does this thing, and she's like sucking their energy. I mean, you have to take that on for that has to be the metaphor. Like that has to be the thing. I was like, is this something about boomers? Is she sucking our kids dry because she's a boomer?
Well, it's about parasites, because that actually is the thematic thing that is sort of strung through the movie, because parasites are mentioned a few times. Julia Garner's teacher, we see at one point, is teaching about parasites. And then Benedict Wong, when he's at home, is watching something about those parasitic ants or whatever. and obviously Gladys is literally a parasite. So I think that's sort of the that's how Gladys ties into some kind of theme on that level.
But she's also an evil influencer.
Nice.
But I think that I want to put this to the movie's credit, that it is mixing these things up and that it is not a clean allegory. Because yes,
it's not fully clear.
If the idea was that she was an evil influencer, they could have made her a young man with, whatever. It could be a manosphere type of allegory somehow. Clearly steered away from that. And, she's, maybe is she a boomer sucking the, extending her life at the expense of children? Yeah, but she's also not quite explicitly, but has been around since the Oregon Trail era. The actual Oregon Trail, not the Oregon Trail era from the 80s.
Not the game.
Yeah. I mean, I would resist, Brett's interpretation there. If the floating gun is just a gag, it's too pointed of a thing there. The gun is too related to what we're dealing with. Like, it had to be something really random. If it's, to use a very specific reference point, the guy with the cheese slices in the Dream episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, it's just
certainly
popping in as a goof on dream logic here and there. The AR-15 is not random enough. It's too close to what we're dealing with for it to be.
Maybe.
But also, Cregger himself specifically denies having a real interpretation of that. He says, I want it there. Like, I like that it's there. I don't know precisely what it means, but I like that it gives the movie a stranger flavor, and people will have different ideas about it.
Okay.
So, which I guess is
I think that's
kind of
what I just
right
said.
up next to what you're saying. Yeah.
I feel vindicated.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
I would also suggest
it sounded less snotty in his version of it than you were. I thought you were attributing to him.
I would also say one other thing about that dream that I think sort of dovetails into my interpretation, and I guess sort of maybe a little bit of what Cregger was saying about it is, that dream ends on one of the funniest moments of the whole movie, which is Brolin's reaction when he wakes up from that dream, which is a very sort of American Werewolf in London, dream within a dream. That got the biggest laugh of the entire movie in my theater when he wakes up from that dream.
Really?
So yeah, just his delivery of that was very, very funny.
That got my audience. Like, they liked that, but they loved the final chase scene.
Yeah,
of the kids all chasing down Aunt Gladys. They were demented Ferris Bueller thing going on. They were rolling in the aisles over that.
Well, that's the reason I can't say this movie doesn't work or is bad, is because it is just the most cathartic ending. It is just the actual belly laughs at that ending because it's so audacious. It's fantastic. This is that barbarian thing, this is he gives you exactly what you want and need at the end of the movie. This is another thing learned from Get Out, perhaps, is that maybe the most successful, important thing that the horror movie can do is kind of deliver that level of cathartic release at the end, that you a fist pump kind of moment at the end of a horror film. Like, if you earn that, there's nothing better. And
absolutely.
And damn, this is just a wonderful ending. A wonderful ending for the film. And I mean, he's earned it every step. The first 2 hours are just to get to this moment almost.
And what I think is particularly sort of excellent about it is I'm a sucker for any time a villain has their scheme or gimmick or powers turned back around on them. And Cregger does that here, I think, in a very satisfying way. And he sets it up sort of without really explicitly calling attention to it. But the fact that Gladys, again, this maybe goes to her sort of being not as on the ball as she should be. She's doing all these things in front of Alex. And he very pointedly is paying very close attention to what she is doing. Cregger intentionally draws our attention to him watching her when she is, going through the ritual required to control people. And that little bit of priming the pump that the audience knows, okay, he's clocked sort of her procedure. That also is part of the reason why the payoff feels earned, because it doesn't feel like it's coming completely out of nowhere, even though the setup is totally uncommented upon by the movie.
It is another thing where I'm just like, so he could have done that actually at any time, really, right?
Well, but he's a kid. I mean, it's just at this moment.
By being 9 years old, you can give him
he didn't have to activate his parents beyond the salt line first or anything. He could just, gone over there and done that at any moment.
Well, he needed to get her.
I know. My brain, I have to shut my brain down on some little things like that occasionally. Sure, he's 9. Yes.
There are logical leaps that we could try and justify about, that why does she needs Alex, I think. She needs a Renfield of sorts, because her voodoo zombies can't go out and buy soup on their own without drawing attention, and she needs to keep them alive to keep drawing power from them somehow, I guess. And that's, by this fairy tale logic, good enough for me, at least in a 2-hour format. Again, I think if we stretch this out to 8 weeks, it would be harder to live in that reality without it coming apart at the seams. But the stuff about Aunt Gladys and her fallibility, I think that's part of what makes her such a great villain to me, is that she is a little omnipotent, but definitely not omniscient, and not completely on the ball. She doesn't know how to blend in, but is vulnerable enough in some way that she feels necessary to blend in. She needs to cover her tracks somehow, and she's not great at that. Like, she has this amazing power that makes it really hard to defeat, but she's not actually good at the execution part of most of this stuff. And Madigan, I think, layers in that. Another thing, like, for as little as we know about her background and how, she is functionally immortal, there's kind of no question in our minds, I don't think, that she is a mortal human.
Right.
Like, that came upon this power and is clinging to it. She's not a deity from, beyond time or anything. Like, she's not I forget, the Pan or whoever from Hereditary. This is
Payman.
Yes, Payman, that's what it is. I knew that wasn't quite right. But yeah, she is a mortal woman with possibly an 18th century education, kind of winging it.
Yeah, she hasn't ever fully assimilated into modern mores, I guess.
She doesn't know how to access makeup tutorials.
This is another Stephen King thing, the sort of loser villain, in a sense, is that the bad guy who kind of is a little bit cart before the horse in many respects, and kind of desperate, which is, I think, a fun thing. I know, I think that's kind of cool. It reminded me of the villains in Doctor Sleep, the sort of itinerant gypsies who, suck children dry to maintain their life. It's essentially the same idea. And it's, I don't know. I like we say, a very effective villain and a villain you enjoy rooting against, which is always really nice. The horror genre sometimes struggles with that, in that, hell, like half the slashers, the identification character ends up being the slasher at some point. And it's,
well, they want to be a franchise.
Yeah.
Killer is the franchise in that environment. And that also can run or bleed over into elevated horror, where they want to make, there be something resonant driving the villain, something, that if it's all being about trauma, we need to explore Michael Myers' childhood trauma or whatever. And that can lead to a confusion of rooting interests here. There is never a moment of confusion or sympathy for this character rooting interest confusion.
No,
and that's wonderful.
It is perfectly hissable as a villain, and that is lovely. I mean, that's what you want from a bad guy. Even Sinners doesn't really have that going. You kind of like that guy,
Yeah, I'll talk out of both sides of my mouth, because I would cite that as a strength of that movie too. That's villain true. Presentation is one of the interesting things about that movie. This is a totally different approach to it, which I love just as much.
I think what Madigan does that is so sort of key to the movie and to the character, to me, is that there's two levels of the performance. Like, there's her public persona, where she's out interacting with people in this town, which is sort of pitched at a very kind of over the top, overtly kind of funny for the audience level. But then the moments where she's just alone with Alex, Madigan is playing those as very genuinely sinister and menacing and threatening. And you, at least I believe, sort of the danger that she poses to Alex and his family. And and by the end of the movie, what I was really impressed with is, like, we've seen very little of Alex until his chapter arrives. And then we sort of get the entire backstory of what's been going on. I really felt for him very quickly within, a few moments of what was going on. And a lot of that is because of the way Madigan sort of plays her moments with him, as like, I really believe, and Cregger's the kind of filmmaker where it wouldn't surprise me, like, I believe she could kill this kid at the end of this movie. And it's something that I think could plausibly happen. And that creates a little bit of extra tension and a little bit more depth, not in terms of like emotional depth for the character of Gladys, but just depth to the performance that I think really is important to the movie.
Yeah. I mean, this is another inspiration, is that I feel this movie calls on Roald Dahl, oddly enough, as I was reminded of, in the child protagonist, to the extent there is a actual protagonist in this film, with the bifurcated structure, but just his section of the movie is very Roald Dahl. I mean, not least because it has like a legitimate old lady witch, and as Roald Dahl
The bald
tends to write
witch.
about. Yeah, like that character could exist in The Witches, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
But but the kid itself is what kind of really, really makes that work for me. It's cool. Yeah, it's a neat flavor for your adult horror film here to have, and no less scary for it. More scary, actually.
There are a couple moments once we're sort of into that last section and we're seeing, how this has all transpired from Alex's point of view. There are a couple moments where Cregger just like cuts to a shot of Alex looking like really forlorn and like really emotionally, psychically beaten up. And it's like, I really felt for this boy. And that's what makes the payoff, I think, even more satisfying, that he's the one who foils Gladys permanently and turns the tables on her.
That's always like structurally that was always going to be satisfying. I feel like, yeah, like you said, having the baddies' power turned on them.
That's very Roald Dahl too.
That is very Roald Dahl. I mean, and we keep like again, we're just citing all the possible influences here. The Roald Dahl influence, I think, is a great point. That ties into the fairy tale aspect of it. The Stephen Kingness of it, like you said, that is sort of a thing Stephen King likes doing. For him, I think it's rooted in The Wizard of Oz and the man behind the curtain thing that he applies to his villains, that once you can expose them, they're a lot smaller and frailer than they want you to believe. What I love about that the fallibility of Aunt Gladys and vulnerability there is it ties into something that we've been knocking around for a couple of years now, which is just the challenges of doing villains in the Trump era, and the idea that she could be this dangerous and kind of dumb at the same time, and this nasty, and also her own worst enemy in some ways.
Yeah, that was on my mind a little because we've been talking about that a lot lately. I'm wondering. I mean, it's such an old world kind of thing. It's the witch who lures the kids into the house. So I don't know that it is a perfect villain for for 2025 necessarily, but it's there. It's absolutely part of the film's commentary. I guess is not
nasty, hissable, dangerous, but not a mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
That's the needle to thread.
Well, she's very dangerous despite being kind of foolish in a great many ways, because she's known. No one suspects her. Like no one is out there looking for witchcraft. I guess they are, but they think it's Julie Gardner.
Well, eventually, yeah.
But even still, like it's not an antagonist you expect to face in 2025 in the suburbs.
Okay, this is what I said. Where not a perfect clean allegory. Once again, just repeating, that's a good thing. But that's what gives this some resonance in its sort of vague symbology, I think, is that the threat to the children is right here in everybody's face, and they're almost determined not to see it. And that ties into school shootings too, I think, is that
it's definitely sort of the Benedict Wong material is definitely doing that. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's also very It as well, where the entire, Derry in some cases literally cannot see the danger that is facing the kids there.
You guys gonna watch that the It show on HBO this year?
Probably not.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna watch the shit out of that, man.
I assume you're gonna make me.
That's my goal.
I feel like they dropped the ball on the second movie to such a huge degree that I'm kind of like, I think I've got the first one is fine. The first one's pretty good. I like the first one a lot. So it's like that's all I need. I don't need any more of this.
To tie in that It movie into what I was saying here about, like, that's a movie that I think it's two movies, but I think it embodies exactly what I was talking about. You can see how cleanly you could break it into two movies structurally, and it kind of ruins the story to do it that way.
Yep.
That's, you end up with one good story and then one that doesn't work on its own, like stand on its own two legs, and that's a problem for that.
It's a shame they've never committed to actually trying to do the structure of the novel. And I was kind of hoping, like, even after the movies came out, like, maybe they could convince the director to do like a a Godfather style. I'm going to, recut this in the structure, chronologically. In this case, it would have been recutting it to match the structure of the novel. I think that would still be interesting to see, and it might improve some of the stuff in the second movie. I think some of the stuff in the second movie is just broken in conception, like what they do with Stan. But
yeah, there's no fixing that.
No.
Take that out entirely. I still love that. Like that's kind of my favorite thing about those movies too. That stuck with me. Just like what a fucking boneheaded decision that is. But anyway, that's a whole other movie.
Reflecting on it, that actually is maybe that is where this structure comes from. Now that I mean that's kind of what that movie's doing, or that book rather is doing, is hopping around and showing stuff from different perspectives, Rashomon style, and then
even more
back.
Complicated than this, though.
Way more, yeah. much more.
It's more complicated and more straightforward in its like plot progression than
you have two strands that are
Pulp
both
Fiction,
moving forward.
Yeah, and this, for as much as I was compared to Pulp Fiction, this Weapons, I mean, is more plot focused, and there's a singular plot that everything's sort of revolving around. It even more so. It's just sort of, it has two timelines progressing linearly that it's sort of weaving back and forth and nodding and like a rope. I don't know if that distinction makes a ton of sense or matters, but this feels a little more jumbled than it to me.
I don't know about jumbled. I mean, it's operating in a completely different medium and at a completely different length. So, I think the structure here is pretty excellent for a 2-hour movie.
No, I would have to agree. I think that the structure of this it makes the film, essentially. Like I was saying, I think a lot of this falls apart if you have to think about it in a different way than how it has been arranged and presented here. That's the genius of this, really, is how the movie is put together. Probably, yeah. If I had to say one single thing that makes this movie work, it is that. It is the way information is doled out, the way it makes you care about the characters, and all of that is based on the order of presentation and how those things are shown to you when the payoff comes, and that kind of keeps the movie moving and fluid and exciting moment to moment, but also builds to this great final moment here. There's the cathartic ending of the thing, and that is, again, that solves a lot of problems. That makes me excuse the plot holes that I can kind of step back and be irritated by. But that's the thing that's great.
But I don't have to say there's one thing that makes the movie work. 'Cause I think there's three things that make this movie work. And it's the structure, like you said, and then it's Aunt Gladys as a villain,
sure.
and a performance. And finally, just, Cregger's got a really good eye or hand for just horror imagery. The Gladys makeup face superimposed on the kids for the first hour of this movie, the opening is creepy, but nobody's really physically menaced until an hour in. Right. And so there's a couple of dream sequences that are spooky, but they're also explicitly, they're not the thing where they're trying to lead us to believe that this is really happening. And then the protagonist wakes up right before they're stabbed. It's put to us, okay, this character is dreaming now, we're doing their dream sequence. And even with that, the image of Julia Garner going into the classroom and having all the kids with in the dark with their heads down on the desks is really evocative, kind of troubling image. And then the kid's face that was one of the trailer images, that's a ooky spooky horror movie image. That's great. And Aunt Gladys just randomly being halfway out of the ground in the woods in her most Pennywise moment. That's that. And then when the first time somebody's kind of physically menaced, when Julia Garner is passed out in the car, and you see the door open, and
that's an incredible shot. That is
just great shots,
masterful. Yeah,
that's for this movie. I guess it wasn't super scary to me because anytime there was a scare, I pretty much immediately started cackling with glee at just oh, that's a great image, blah blah blah. The only time I really winced and had a hard time watching was when he gets stabbed with the 3 needles in the face, just because it's so obvious what was about to happen. And
but even that is also still funny. So
the nuts and bolts filmmaking here is more than enough to kind of make it a very entertaining film, and I think it is arrayed in such a way that it's very impressive. I do mourn for the elevated horror version of this. The one that takes itself more seriously. I think you can have it still be funny and cathartic and also be upsetting, and also tap into those fears that I was discussing earlier that are basically the promise of the hook here. The central premise of this is terrifying, and they don't really want to get into why it's terrifying. And I do wish that was part of the movie. Now, I've mentioned Hereditary in passing. I think Hereditary is a very funny movie. I think there's a lot of laughs to be had in that film. It just knows how to fuck with you, too. It knows really hard how to be terrifying. That is a scary movie, moment to moment. And there's also belly laughs in there. And that's a high watermark for me. I think it's definitely my favorite Aster film. Definitely my favorite of that movement. I know it's kind of a cliche choice, but I think it for a reason. I think it's a very effective thing. And, I think even Get Out kind of has a little bit more, muscularity to it. It scares. I think that there's that movie is frightening, in a way that I don't think Weapons is really trying to be at the end of the day. It's a ravishing entertainment. And, this is not necessarily a deal breaker. Sinners is not really trying to be scary either, Like, it's not a prerequisite for a horror film. But I don't know. This premise had some juice to it that I think went a little unrealized by all the other things that it ends up being. That's all.
Maybe. And I'll take your point. My critique of Jordan Peele as a master of horror is that I think his horror movies are ultimately playing a little too soft, and
they're going to have happy
crowd pleasing.
Yeah.
And there might be a kill or two in the first half of the movie but that's going to be a side character. The movies that the characters of the movies have sympathy for are going to get their happy endings, and that seems to now be kind of locked into the formula there. And that's why I think actually my favorite part of Jordan Peele's whole filmography is the first half of Us, where that was not clear.
Right.
And that's where he's playing the nastiest and hardest, I think, with the horror stuff. And I would say this movie,
like Brolin has it. Brolin is I think really keyed in this performance. I ended up loving that really for I think just what he's bringing to it, because there's not much on paper. A lot of these characters are not particularly deep. They got a few character traits, and that's what we got. And there's enough of them; it's not an issue. But Brolin is he's really locked in here. Ooh, he's good. And I love that when you find
I think everybody's locked in pretty much. I think Benedict Wong is just very dependable, and he's perfect in this, doing both the really down to earth stuff and then the wild zombie shit. I think Alden Ehrenreich's fun, and the guy who plays the drug addict is pretty great. Pretty funny,
all good performances, but I don't know. I think it might just be dad stuff that's gotten me gravitating to Brolin. And I think the brilliant thing that I love about this is that when in the kind of the final story, when it's revealed that actually his kid's the bully, his kid's kind of an asshole, that totally makes sense. You're like, oh, actually, yes, that tracks. That's exactly right. Okay. That's really interesting to me. And because he is that kind of forceful personality and a bit of an ass, is just employed in, in trying to find his kids. So you're okay with it. That's like the closest I think that the movie comes to sort of layered character work.
And I think his moment in his nightmare where he's sort of on the bed with, he's talking to his son, and he's basically verbalizing. He's essentially saying, I was never able to tell you that I loved you, and maybe I'm never going to get the chance. That's a really well played moment by Brolin, and I think it lands very nicely emotionally. And of course, then we get a scare right after that, and then a laugh right after that. So that's a great sort of 60-second little slice of the movie.
Apparently, it was originally supposed to be Pedro Pascal cast and everything, and the strike changed it, and he couldn't do it anymore. I think Brolin's the better choice.
That we got Brolin.
I like Pascal, but I think Brolin was the guy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's rare. I think I could say that Pascal would just be a replacement level. That seems like a lateral move from one.
He would have been fine, but Brolin is I think, specifically perfect for this.
Yeah, he's pretty great. I wouldn't change that. And that's the thing. So the movie plays more serious in the early goings, which is what's jarring. That transition for John.
And I
does,
enjoyed that.
But I think by contrast to the Jordan Peele stuff, if I was mentioning, like, it plays nasty enough in the first half that I can buy getting pretty deep into this movie that there will not be a happy ending. Like, I don't think that the Alex kid is going to get killed at any point in this movie.
No.
And I think that the kids are all going to be freed at the end or whatever. But I could buy Brolin or Julia Garner going down in this all the way up to the end. And it becomes this big cathartic kind of, ecstatic thing there to a degree. And that's, again, it's a great ending and all. What I think lands the plane for me ultimately, though, on that, is that it's followed up kind of quickly by the closing narration noting that, like,
they've been lobotomized.
Actually, the kids aren't fine.
Yeah, it's not better. It's not a happy ending. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, the kids are not saved. It's that sort of lands the allegory to me too, in a way of that the parents are all freaking out about these anxieties, but ultimately looking for a way to sort of declare victory and move on and not have to engage with the actual horrors of these different things that threaten our children. And we created school shooting drills, so we're more prepared for the next one or whatever. But the kids, even the kids that survived, are still traumatized. The kids that haven't been through it yet are still kind of traumatized by all this. It's not like nothing's actually okay at the end of this, even after we get to revel in Gladys getting dismembered.
That's right. And that is a thing that sticks with you. Like, it would absolutely be a case that if all the kids were fine at the end and they all just snapped out of it the way Josh Brolin does, I must admit, then that would not be the right ending. It would kind of make the movie feel very meaningless, I think. And it doesn't. It has this...
Well, it's also a little bit more that Roald Dahl thing. Like, the end of the novel of The Witches sort of implies that our hero is not going to be alive for very much longer.
It goes into quite a bit of detail about it. It's just like, well, you're staying a mouse. You're definitely going to stay a mouse. And we don't really know how long that'll live. Real mouse, 3 years is about the longest. You're a magic mouse, so it might be more like 10. And just sort of, that's the end of the book. It's pretty great.
I will just say about the Brolin not being lobotomized thing. Like, I took that to be like, the kids have been under for what, like 3 or 4 weeks? The parents were under for 3 or 4. Like, Brolin was under for 2 minutes. So I think the longer you go, the more your brain gets fried, basically.
Yeah, that's the way it intuited to me, because they established specifically Alex's parents are still catatonic, and then some of the kids have started talking again. But then it's like, even that, I think it raised enough question in my mind, like, oh yeah, the kids are talking again. That doesn't mean they're fine. Because you've got me like thinking about this trauma in these terms now.
At best, you're going to be, dealing with special needs care for the rest of the kid's life. So it's actually quite a downer ending in many ways, despite that. You don't walk out feeling that way because you just saw 17 kids dismember a witch. But it's got those teeth at the end, and I do appreciate that. Even if it is kind of, I don't know, it's a weird elliptical way to leave. But
it's kind of Raimi-esque in a way, like the Evil Dead movies. The first two sort of end on paper kind of bummer notes for the character of Ash. But the energy of the way the endings unfold, you don't walk out of the movie feeling anything other than, pretty jazzed.
Right. That's true. So ultimately, I think that we all agree that this works and that it's a lot of fun. I'm finding myself, I'm on the outside of most people. This is so well reviewed. People love this film. I feel like a little churlish coming in and being like, well, there's plot holes, but I do like it a lot. I think it's a solid film.
I'm surprised to have you be the naysayer here. I feel like our normal dynamics is I'm more the nitpicker and and all that. But
and this is a big horror movie.
It's a refreshing change of pace.
Yeah, I know. This should be right up my alley. And it is to an extent. I had fun, like I said, like you said. I do like this movie, but yeah, I don't know that this thing ultimately ages well. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see what in 5 years, because of these plot holes, but also because it is, doing so many things from other things. There's so many current trends of horror that this is evoking and playing with, without actually being about much itself. I'm just not sure that this is one of the great horror films. I mean, I think it puts Cregger in a very good place to make his next film, for certain.
Yeah, I think it'll continue to have a bit of an audience and develop somewhat of a legacy, at least because one, it's attached to Cregger, who's now a name,
Yep.
and two, I think just Aunt Gladys is
well,
unique enough
Yeah.
as a
that's going to be a good
horror,
Halloween
like
costume.
iconography.
Yeah,
that-
uh-huh.
yeah,
You're gonna see
Immediate
that
horror
this year.
icon kind of has been born with her, I think.
yeah. And we'll probably see some memes come out of this. Yeah.
Again, I think just the fact that it sends an audience out of the theater on such a high, that
Never a bad thing.
no, that's going to keep it sort of buoyant, I think, for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. That could be. Yeah, and a film I'm glad is having success. I'm glad people are seeing it and liking it. And, successful horror movies is always good. Feels things that feel fresh, I'm glad this is hitting, I don't care if the next Conjuring film succeeds. Like, it's nice to have new kind of flavors succeeding in horror. And that's always to the good of the whole genre, because it is actually one of the most resilient franchises historically. You can always make your money back on horror. Has been struggling a little in the last few years. Like, I think they've kind of oversaturated the market. You're getting like 2 or 3 major releases a month, and not all of them can make $50 million, so.
Although
it's
this
good
has
to-
been a good year. This had for horror box office. Sinners did very well.
Yes.
The Final Destination movie, whatever you think of the sort of crass, crowd pleasing nature of that kind of thing, I thought it was kind of fun. That did
too.
very, very well. 28 years later did pretty solidly, open number 1.
Well
this
enough.
obviously is going to do very well. I think it's already made its budget back just on its first weekend. If Conjuring 4 is actually a decent movie, I think that'll do well. That remains to be seen. So
I think we're done with those. I think, honestly, I think the people have moved on, which is interesting.
Well, okay, but the other thing to, I think, celebrate about this is that, and its success, is that for as much as we've been drilling down on all the influences that we can try and track through its DNA strands, like, this is an original movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not a legacy sequel. It's not a reboot. It's not existing IP in any way. And yeah, it owes debts to Stephen King or whoever, but it is not. It is a wholly original screenplay written by a human, and it's great to see that succeed.
Well, it's like you were saying about the Tarantino thing, where it's like, yes, you can pinpoint all the influences or things that may have been floating around sort of in the filmmaker's mind as he was writing, but the synthesis of that, the creation of what the final thing is, still feels like singular and wholly unique to this individual.
Yeah, Cregger's definitely got a voice now. Like, you can say what a Zach Cregger film feels like, and that 2 movies in, that's pretty good. That's the
I hope we
soonest it
can
could
still
possibly
say
happen.
that after the next one, because you know what he's doing, right?
So the next, yeah, of course, he's taken that and
yeah.
right into making a Resident Evil movie.
Yeah, that sucks.
Which I don't know. I
Maybe it'll be great though. I mean,
yeah, it might be. Honestly,
Maybe.
I was doing an interview with him yesterday where he talked about how he's a big fan of Resident Evil games and he's never seen any of the movies.
good.
But he's just excited about the material there. And then he said he's got a sci-fi thing he wants to do after that. The last question for you guys I have, though, that I want to leave on is, after those things, perhaps, when it's time, I think eventually he's just got to do a straight up Stephen King adaptation, right?
Yes, I would love that. I would enjoy it.
What do you guys want to see him do?
Tommy Knockers.
Needful Things.
Oh,
Similar.
all right,
Similar. Okay. Mm-hmm.
I go Tommy Knockers just because I think that's such a broken, rotten book that
Yeah.
I mean, you can only kind of improve it, I think, especially if Cregger, really sort of dives in and can strip away some of the nonsense. Like, there could be a version of that story that I think could work really well if you're not like and why would anyone be beholden to the faithfulness to the Tommy Knockers? But like, if you're willing to get in there and reconstruct it a little bit, I think there could be something there. And it's only been done for TV once. It's not one of these that have been, made multiple times. Like, we're about to get our 4th Carrie adaptation from Mike Flanagan for some reason that I can't explain, because why do we need a 4th Carrie adaptation?
Yeah, I never understood that. That's a shame.
But John, you're shaking your head like, but Needful Things is just a slightly less broken version of the Tommyknockers in that regard.
No,
It's never been done great. It's
better
I agree
villain.
with him. I agree with him. Tommyknockers is fun. Needful Things is a personal favorite of mine and one itching to be redone, actually.
I think Needful Things is a little too close to Weapons.
Maybe.
In that, like, its villain is
that's true, maybe.
Similar and the small town aspect of it. My pick, I want him to remake Maximum Overdrive.
I
could see that, actually.
Get back to the sketch comedy muscles a little bit.
Only if he directs it permanently blitzed on cocaine for the entire shoot, like Stephen King was.
I mean, I hear
method
you.
Directing.
That's almost a movie. I'm just like, well, why mess with what you've already got, though? You know, it's like Carrie. We've already kind of nailed Maximum Overdrive.
Maybe that's the apex of what Maximum Overdrive can be. Maybe you don't want more competent comedy stylings built into it, but okay. Well,
is there any King stuff that hasn't really been adapted yet that he could do? Like, I'm a big fan of the novel Joyland, which I think was maybe like within the last 10 or 15 years he wrote.
It's a good one. I don't think that's a good Zach Cregger one.
No, it's a little too kind of introspective and kind of thoughtful in a way.
You want like Rob Reiner when Rob Reiner was good to make that. That's that kind of,
so 30 Rob Reiner 30 years ago, yes.
Right. I would like to see that adapted, but I don't know. Like I'm kind of like
adapted. Like, I'm trying to think of
like what's a really
he's not going to do Eyes of the
kinda,
Dragon. I mean,
no. I mean, I've always said that I want somebody to do The Jaunt, but he's not the guy for that either. I mean, it kind of has to be one of his dark comedies, I think, of which there are plenty. You know, that's kind of, I guess, why I gravitate towards Needful Things. I'm happy with Mike. I'm happy with Needful Things.
Needful Things. Yeah, Maximum Overdrive. These are good choices. Yeah, and you know what? I'm not a Resident Evil fan, but I'm willing to see him take a crack at it. Particularly if he's coming at. The enthusiasm I heard in the interview sounded genuine to me, so I'm a little more hopeful about that one than most of the video game reboot quals.
He also doesn't seem like the kind of filmmaker. You know, and again, we have a small sample size, and I haven't extensively listened to him in interviews, but he doesn't seem like the kind of filmmaker who would just take a paycheck gig that he feels no passion for. So, like, I think he's got to have some kind of take, and he's got to have some kind of approach that he thinks is going to make Resident Evil worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, he is entering into that Jordan Peele era, right? Not era, into that sort of mode of he can get a film made on his name, I would say, after Weapons. Not necessarily an expensive film, but he can kind of do what he wants at the moment, which is a great place to be in. And I guess what I want him to do is what he wants to do. You know, the thing he is passionate about. If that's Resident Evil, great. That's fantastic. I'm open to it. You know, it's not what I would have chosen for him, but I'm not the one making his decisions. He is in the unique position to be able to make his own decisions about what to make. So that's great. That's all good.
Threads the needle if that's successful as a studio IP thing. It gets him the budget he needs to make the sci-fi thing, which sci-fi is probably the hardest. Horror is the easiest genre to do on the cheap. Sci-fi is the hardest.
Right. Well, certain kind of sci-fi anyway. I'm curious what his kind of sci-fi would be. That's certainly something to look forward to. All right.
I think he's got the ambition for it to be kind of bigger than you might first think. Maybe something along the scope of the Tommyknockers, perhaps.
See, it all comes back to the Tommyknockers. All roads lead to the Tommyknockers.
That's right. All right. So when next time they adapt the Tommyknockers to the screen, Brett will return to us. And we will discuss why it's a disaster.
James Wan tried for like a decade. They were trying to make it happen. Yeah. And then they just threw up their hands in defeat. Because fucking weird novel. All right. Thank you very much for joining us, Brett.
And, thank you for having me.
And thanks for listening. All right. Talk to you soon. All about, Tarantino ripoffs. That's coming up real soon. All right. Thanks for listening.